meeting to order at 7 p.m. with a roll call vote. Danny Golden. Glenn Dion. Jeanette Stewart here. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Tonight we have with us Jeannie Forrester, who is the senator, and she would like to discuss some issues affecting the towns in her district. Jeannie?
You want me to stand up?
Sure, you can stand and face everybody, then everybody can hear you. Is this okay? That's fine.
That's fine. Well, thank you all for allowing me to come tonight and speak. It's hard to believe it's been 2 years since I was here when I was campaigning for this office, and I told you back then that the reason that I decided to run for office, I'd never run for elected office before, but I wanted to go to Concord and represent my communities, the 31 communities that I do have in District 2. Having been a former town administrator and worked in communities on economic development through the Main Street program, thought I had done a lot of good work on a local level and wanted to take those skills to Concord and again represent the communities. And so I've been working very hard at that. I kind of just want to give you an update. I sit on the Senate Finance Committee. I am the only freshman on that committee, so I'm pretty excited about that I got the honor to serve with a lot of people who are very seasoned and have been around for a while. I'm also, at my request, had asked to be on Public and Municipal Affairs, because that's the reason I went to Concord, was to represent the communities, and they did put me on that. I'm the vice chair of that committee, so we hear a lot of legislation that have to do with affecting the communities. In the last year or so after the campaign and starting up, I've spent a lot of time out in my communities trying to help however I can, doing a lot of outreach. I have an e-newsletter. If anyone's interested, they can go on my website and sign up, and I do regular updates about what's happening in Concord and what's happening in the district. I do a monthly column that I send out to the newspapers on whatever the issue might be. For instance, the last one that was just printed had to do with redistricting. Sometimes papers print it, sometimes they don't. You just don't know if they will. But I like to try to communicate as much as possible to let you know what's happening in Concord. This summer I held a road managers roundtable discussion because I had heard from my communities the challenges they face with different agencies and state government, and I didn't like what I was hearing. I didn't want it. I don't like that adversarial type of relationship, and so I brought in the road managers, DPW folks, and we talked about the challenges that they were facing, and working with those folks and getting together with the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, because that's where we heard we were having some challenges, and the UNH Technology Transfer Center. We created a certification program for the municipalities. And what that will do is allow the road agents or DPW folks, and it's enabling legislation, so it's not mandatory. You can send your road agent to this certification program, and once they're certified through the UNH Technology Transfer Center and it's signed off by DES, then regular routine maintenance of culverts, repair and maintenance, you don't have to pull permit every time, which is what I was hearing from a lot of my road agents, that every little repair they had to make, they had to go to DES, and then you'd see delays, and so now with this program they only have to report on a quarterly basis, which saves, actually is going to save DES time because they're only going to have to do it on a quarterly basis. It's going to save the towns having that paperwork every time they need to do a road culvert repair. And it's certified by the DES. They worked with us on creating this program. So we're pretty excited about that. The other project, or the other roundtable discussion we had just recently was, as I was out in the district, gotta remember to turn this way. As I was out in the district, I heard a lot from my welfare administrators that they were seeing abuses of the EBT card, that's the electronic benefit transfer card. And so I brought in the Department of Health and Human Services, Terry Smith from Family Services, brought him in, brought in some folks from the New Hampshire Municipal Center, Local Government Center, and invited all the welfare administrators and any other town managers, administrators who were interested. We got together and we talked about what they were seeing. And it was an interesting, you were there, it was really good feedback back and forth. And I think we've come up with some ideas to help the towns. But some of the things that we heard that day were pretty outrageous. Samberton, we heard a situation where a family came, the rest stop on 93 Samberton. The car broke down there. Now they were from another state. The car broke down there, and $6,800 later, cost to the town, they were gone.
It doesn't make sense.
No, but they had to pay to get their car fixed.
Yeah. One thing I liked about that meeting was
Had to pay on the hotel.
the one thing I liked about the meeting was with the other towns there, everybody gave an input, and I think it was good that everybody,
Yeah. Well, I think it is good. I think it's good for the state to hear from the people who are on the front lines dealing with this every day and what the problems are. They need to be a little more open-minded and working. The relationship needs to be improved, and they need to understand that they're there to serve the towns. They need to have some more customer service, I think, mentality. So, I also worked with the wood burning power plants. We have one in Alexandria. We have another one in Bridgewater. We were hearing this summer that their contracts weren't getting renewed through PSNH, and there was great concern about these plants shutting down and the number of jobs that would be affected by that. So we worked very hard with the governor, executive counselors, a lot of different folks coming together and working out a plan to keep these power plants in business, and we've done that. So those are just some of the examples of some of the things that we're working on. Of course, we balanced the budget, and Senate Finance working with the House side, and it was a difficult budget. Pat and I were just talking a few minutes ago about, during the hearings, hours of testimony from a lot of different people about how they were going to be impacted, and we had to make some tough decisions. We had to make cuts. I mean, there's only one, you have so much money, you're going to either have to cut or raise taxes. And we made the cuts, and they were across the board. Everybody felt the pain. You have to kind of balance, what's your most important need. Right now, you might be reading in papers that the hospitals and the universities are upset with us because they got some cuts. But if you're looking at having to help the developmentally disabled or mentally ill versus lowering tuition rates for students, you've got to make a choice, and we did. And they weren't popular and they weren't fun to make, but we made them. Those were tough decisions, just like you have to do. You have to live within your means. So, and of course, House Bill 648, which had to do with Northern Pass. We did a lot of work on that this summer, but it was a great collaborative effort of a lot of people coming together to make it happen. And if no one, is everyone familiar with that?
What would you enlighten on 648 the people that don't know about it? Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. 648 has to do with Northern Pass issue. So we have Hydro-Quebec and Northeast Utilities wanting to come into the state, bring it in a transmission line through the state to bring power to Connecticut and Massachusetts. And the project itself, it's a private project. And the problem is they were threatening the use of eminent domain, taking private property away from people through the eminent domain process to make their project happen. And all we were saying through House Bill 648 was, you know, if you want to do this project, you have to pay people for their property, and you can't threaten to take their property through the eminent domain process. So it seems like a very simple concept, but it was a real struggle, but we did finally get it passed out of the Senate, and now we're just waiting for the governor to sign it. For the second part of the session, we're hearing a lot of bills. And not so many in Senate Finance, although we are getting legislation coming before Senate Finance asking for appropriations. Just the other day, we had Senator Kelly come and introduce legislation asking for $15 million for the universities and colleges. And while we all like to support that, I'm a graduate of UNH. The fact is, we don't have the money. So you can't give them money we don't have. So we had to vote against that. And it wasn't a vote against education, it was a vote against opening up the budget to try to find that money. Because to find that money, we would have either had to cut something else or raise taxes to get that $15 million. So, I'm here if you have any questions for me, any concerns, thoughts.
Anyone in the audience? Huh?
I think we should do more of those roundtable discussions, not wanting to put more, more workload on you and also expenses on the Senator's budget, but certainly the welfare roundtable discussion was very worthwhile, much more so than any slide presentation you can have, because as Jeanette says, the interplay that we had was super. It really was. And I think other issues like that, if you can bring that to the forefront, that's what we should do going forward.
Well, one of the ideas that you had mentioned, which I think is a great idea, is economic development roundtable discussion. And I actually started that in Haverhill. I've done a roundtable discussion up there on economic development because that was what they were interested. Same thing in Warren. I've done it in Warren. So if you have something that you have an interest in or want to do, call me. We'll do it. We'll get the right people in Concord to come meet with you and have these discussions, because you're right. They need to hear from you about what's happening, and we need to bring the experts to you to help you.
I think the timing is very good, Senator, because we have the results of our charrette coming within the next 3 weeks. We have the master plan, which is ongoing, but certain chapters are being finalised now, and this will be a great help to us.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they come up. I read about it in the paper, and as I was mentioning, we had a charrette in Meredith probably 5 or 6 years ago. I actually wrote the grant for that, and they came up with some really spectacular ideas for us. Now you just have to follow through.
To find the money.
Yeah. A lot of bake sales.
Yeah.
And just a quick question. Well, it might not be so quick, but I promise I won't be. I was just wondering, since we all are talking about revenues, and yes, the budget in this town has been hit very hard. What are our state representatives doing to help bring in revenue into our state through different enterprises besides Northern Pass? And what ideas have we developed to start doing this? Because unless we start bringing revenue in, it's just going to get worse year to year.
Well, that's a good question. We have had several pieces of legislation to try to make New Hampshire more business friendly. and we've been very cautious about what it is we pass because we don't want to negatively impact. For instance, I had a piece of legislation I introduced last session, Senate Bill 155, that had to do with expense deductions, 179 expense deductions, which basically makes New Hampshire follow the federal limit on expense deductions, because when I was out in the communities visiting businesses, what I heard was they weren't making investments because in New Hampshire it's $20,000 that you can write off versus on a federal level it's $500,000. So the incentive wasn't there to invest, and if we created that investment or that incentive to invest, they'd buy equipment, expand their business, hire new people. But in Ways and Means, when I brought that to Ways and Means, their concern was, is that going to impact us negatively revenue-wise? So they're being very cautious about not putting forward any legislation that's going to hurt revenue. I'm sure you've heard about the tobacco tax. And that was something that the Senate, we did not support that, but when we came to if you're familiar with the Committee of Conference, it's where the House and Senate come together and we try to negotiate the final budget. And it was one of the issues, one of the items that the House wanted. It was sort of a line in the sand. That's what they wanted, and we voted that in. And they sincerely believe that if we lowered the tobacco tax, we'd see more revenue, and that didn't happen. It does have a sunset provision in it. So there are several pieces of legislation out there. I'm on a committee to study business taxes. We were talking about lowering the business profits tax. Again, trying to encourage businesses to come into New Hampshire. But in terms of
the business profits tax, how about actually fixing it so a business that makes a profit pays a tax? Because it's set up right now, if you're in business, you lose money, you still end up paying a business profit tax for 70 years. You got to cut it somewhere, so you end up cutting an employee, or on the other side, you don't invest in your business because the state took the money.
Right.
I mean, it's not a fair tax. The way it's currently written.
Right, and you have the BET too, but on the committee that I'm sitting on, they're recommending reducing, because now our BPT tax is actually higher than the surrounding states where it used to be lower. So they're talking about reducing that down over a 4 or 5 year period from 8.5 to 7.5 in increments. But even then, they're being very cautious because they're saying we don't want to lower that and then hurt revenues, and have even more problems. So I guess the short answer is we're working on ways to make businesses come to New Hampshire versus looking at a sales or an income tax. I've got a piece of legislation I'm working on right now. It's to create a interagency task force, and it sort of kind of follows because of Northern Pass. And so this interagency task force is going to look at the feasibility of the state of New Hampshire having its own underground energy corridor that will tell people where the energy or the electricity is going to come through our state. We'll make that decision, and then they'll pay us the revenue by using our corridor. Versus right now with PSNH and the Project Northern Pass, we're not going to get some towns will benefit a little bit, but we want to be paid the rent on the poles or on the energy corridor. So that's something I've been working with the Department of Transportation and the Public Utilities Commission and a lot of different agencies to get that legislation passed and see if that might be a long-term sustainable resource or revenue for us.
Thank you.
Steve?
What do you see going on as it relates to state funding for local education and the No Child Left Behind, question that's out there right now?
Are you referring to what just happened in terms of us not getting the waiver? Are you referring to educational amendment?
Well, a couple of things. One is, if I understood it correctly, is there's some discussion about getting out of the No Child Left Behind piece, which would, I guess, we would forego a certain amount of federal funding if we did that. And what's the upside of doing that? And then the other piece is just general state funding for things like retirement costs and things like that that get pushed down at the local level.
Well, relative to No Child Left Behind, I had a, last week was my second meeting that I met with all the superintendents in the 31 communities. Not all of them showed up, but I had a roundtable discussion with them, and I did that last year with them as well. And we talked about the constitutional amendment, the CA-CR 12, which has to do with education funding. We also talked about the waiver process, which is this No Child Left Behind. And the way they explained it to me, and then I also met with the Commissioner of the Department of Education last week too, is that the waiver had too many strings that the state of New Hampshire could not have possibly met, or the individual communities would have been more burdened than not to try to take that waiver. So they've chosen something, and there may be somebody who's more educated on it than I am, called the growth model. And so the individual communities in New Hampshire are trying to adjust to this and still looking at the waiver process, so that they may apply for it next year, but this year they felt like it was just going to be too restrictive, too many strings for the money that they were going to get, and it was going to hurt New Hampshire more. And the second question you asked me, which had to do with
Just general state funding of education as it relates to, for example, I know that recently local towns have picked up a large percentage of retirement costs for teachers. And just what you see moving forward as far as costs coming down to a local level, or once maybe state.
And I'll tell you, that was one of the things I said when I went to Concord. I was going there because I didn't want to see the downshift to the communities, and it happened. You know, it happened. I think it happened less under our kind of what we did, because and the cost got shifted around, no doubt about it. But in the governor's budget, he was talking about getting rid of all the retirement, that the state was sending. Then he would have really felt it. What the Senate did was shift that to the employee, so that they had to pick up more of their own retirement costs. But it's it's been a hard year, and as much as and that goal wasn't right. In the Senate Finance, there were a couple of goals we had: not to downshift to the communities, to try to help the most needy as much as possible. And so you have those goals, and you try very hard to meet those goals, and I think we did an all right job. I mean, in a perfect world, in a great world, everybody would get everything they needed, but that just wasn't where we were at. We walked into this with an $800 million deficit, and we could have taken the easy way out and just kicked the can down the road, but just like on a federal level, you have to stop somewhere. So. Loon question?
No loon question. But what great things have we got to look forward to in this year? Upcoming events.
No.
4th of July.
Anything specific?
No, nothing specific, but it seems like we're getting a whole lot of bad news from the powers that be, but there's got to be some sort of a light.
Well, unemployment's down.
Good.
And, a couple weeks ago, and I think you and I may have talked about this when I met with you and your wife a couple of weeks ago, that we had a meeting with, we had economists come in and and tell us that it looked like we were headed in the right direction, but that, the problem might be what's happening in Greece, in Europe, that we may see a double dip, we may see another slight recession, and so that's why we're being very cautious about what we're doing at a state level. But it looks like we might be coming out of it, but we just have to be very cautious.
Stock market closed the highest that it has in 50 years today.
I wasn't there to see that.
It'll reflect in your benefits.
You mentioned your website that we could get more of your, what is it?
It's Jeannie, Janie, Forrester.com.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I every couple of weeks, I try to send out, like I just sent out an e-newsletter last night, telling folks about some of the legislation that's, that we just went through. And in the next couple of days, I'll talk about the constitutional amendment for education and the other one, CR 6, which has to do with the tax cap, which what the Senate did. In the House, they wanted to create a tax cap, and the Senate basically took it, and Senate President and other leadership, and turned it into a spending cap. And there are 26 other states that have spending caps, and in fact, in New Hampshire, there are 25% of the towns have some type of spending cap. So if you believe in the philosophy that I do, that when I went into this, that it's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem, then that would be the way to address it, would be to have a spending cap. And even if it passes the Senate and the House, it's still got to go for a vote. People have to vote on it, and I think ultimately it's your decision, and we'll see what people believe.
That one bit of legislation that you mentioned in your email about the junkyards and the setback.
I had met with the selectmen up in Romney, and the zoning, the way the statute reads, it says your zoning board. There are certain setback requirements for a junkyard, but it leaves it to the zoning board. And so what the town of Romney had wanted me to do was repeal that section. And in fact, I got my public and municipal affairs chair kind of gave me a hard time this morning because he wanted to get it out of that committee. And I said, well, I want to make sure I'm not harming any other community, that there are no unintended consequences by passing this legislation. So I am talking with some other kind of professionals in the field and other communities before we pass this. So I'm still working on that. But basically what it is in the town of Rumney, because they don't have a zoning ordinance, they have a junkyard that they can't recognize as a junkyard, therefore they can't give them a license, if you will, get fees from them for being a junkyard. It's because of something in the law. So that's what we're trying to fix. But with everything, you don't want to fix it for one person and then hurt everyone else. So that's what that was about.
Thank you.
So,
I have a question concerning a House bill that's, I think, due to the floor tomorrow. I don't know how much you know about House bills and how far they get to the Senate. But basically, it's the idea of discontinuing regional planning commissions.
Oh, yes. I am familiar with that. And I don't know where it's at in the House. I can tell you that I've heard about it and I've talked to several people about it. I've had experience with regional planning commissions, and I don't think, I have to see the final legislation, but I don't think I can support something like that because I think they provide a service, and at least my experience has been very good. So.
Yeah, there's 221 towns in the state, and most of them are run by volunteer boards and can use the professional support that an OEP doesn't have the staff to support.
Right. Kim and Collette is right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Kim
and
Kirk.
yeah, and I actually
That's
talked to
really
him.
kind.
Yes, and I talked to him the other day about it, and then I spoke to a couple other people about it as well. So, I think people are trying to, legislators are trying to find ways to streamline state government, save money, and sometimes they're good ideas, and sometimes they're not good ideas. And
Well, they cut it out of the line item in the state budget, so it looks, again, it's the small towns that will suffer for, what's the alternative, the $300 an hour
But that's
lawyer for
exactly-
asking for advice?
Yeah, but that's exactly the kind of thing, as a legislator, it really helps for me to hear from you. Send me an email, pick up the phone, call me, tell me. Because there's so much going on in the State House, so much legislation flying around that I try very hard when something comes up that I know the people out there that I can, bounce it off and ask, what do you think? But sometimes you can't catch everything, so it helps to you. I don't think it's gonna go on.
Well, thank you, Jeannie, for coming. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right?
Thank you. And golden eye.
Okay, we have approval of minutes, and the first one is February 4th, and that was the meeting we had right after the deliberative session to go over a couple of warrant articles. I didn't see anything wrong with that. Did you, Glenn?
No.
I'll make a motion to approve February 4th minutes.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Danny was absent with notice at that meeting. February 6th. I didn't see anything in there. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of February 6th. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And then the work session of February 13th. Did you see anything in that one?
No.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of February 13th. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. One thing under old business is the board is working on the merit, wages, and the job description with the town administrator. So we're going to give him different ideas that we have. We're going to highlight things out of papers that we have that talk about town administrators and their job descriptions and that. So we're all going to give them to Paul, and then at the next work session, we will go over everything and decide exactly what we're going to do. The other old business, Paul, you're working on the user fees. Are you going to do
Yes,
that?
that's going to be quite a lengthy project. We started it. We've got comparisons in already from Holderness. They've asked us to go on their website. Plymouth has given us their lengthy list, and Thornton. So we're waiting for the others. I think we should look at the contiguous communities first, and then if the board feels we should go further afield, then we'll do that. But this is an exercise that's going to take more than a couple of weeks.
And then we have to have a public hearing for that to increase those fees.
If you have, there are certain fees that you have to have a public meeting on to increase. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Before we go over that, as we're doing that, Paul, can you also see on all those different fees, where all the fees fall on all the different boards, and see if there's overlaps?
Right.
So that we're not, have regulations, so in order to move this, you have to see the planning board and the building, and try to, I don't think part of it is just to,
Streamline.
yeah, I don't think it's just to raise fees. I think we need to streamline it so it's
Okay.
easier to do business with the town of Ashland.
Right.
Under new business, the 4th of July committee is meeting at 6 p.m. on Thursday night. So if anybody is interested in going to that, being a volunteer to help out with the 4th of July, it would be greatly appreciated. There's a lot of different things to do, and a lot of people give a lot of time on the 4th of July. So it's at the Common Man, is that correct?
We need the help, so anybody can help out.
Danny, Paul, Gwen, do you have anything under new business? Town Administrator's report?
This afternoon, Harold Parker from the office of Congressman Bass came to the town office as part of the Congressman's outreach program to answer questions, comments and concerns from constituents. Mr. Mazzone from 145 River Street was there, as was Dan Stack from our Conservation Commission, and they spoke about the problems with the river, particularly with the silt that's coming down off the mountainside and also that's coming down in the river. And I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but I'm supposed to write a letter to Congressman Bass outlining the background of the work that's been done in Ashland and the problems that we've encountered, and perhaps call upon the Army Corps of Engineers when they come back from fighting abroad and places like that and building bridges, and see what we can do to help those people who live on the river.
Well, basically, Mr. Parker said that Congressman can't get involved unless he's requested to from the various towns involved. And in this particular bout with the river, the dredging is from the covered bridge down, and it certainly needs to be done. As what happened this past summer, DES put out 500 cubic feet per second over the dam in an effort to drop the lakes before the hurricane came. All right? On the river, you could practically walk across it. There was no water. But the lakes only dropped 2 inches.
Right.
So it illustrated the fact that because there's so much sediment in the river, it's very, very shallow. You can't drain the lakes when you got a shallow river. So in order to help DES, in order to help everybody that lives around the waterway, and as far as flooding is concerned, the river needs to be dredged. The last time it was officially dredged was at the end of the 1800s. There's a cornerstone over by the marina. Okay, it was inscribed, and just before they put in the steamboats, okay, it was dredged to make way for the steamboats. And that was the last time it was officially dredged. So this is the idea, and of course, you know, realizing that towns don't have that kind of money. So in order to get the Corps involved, he suggested that we write them a letter, write a letter to the Congressman in care of Mr. Parker so he can deliver it, and request that the Congressman get a hold of the Army Corps of Engineers and ask them to come and do a survey. All right, at least get the ball rolling. So that was his suggestion.
Even the Marine Patrol boat is having problems, I understand, getting up the river now. So
That's it. When we get into low water, they can't get down that river.
That's quite alarming, yes. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I didn't mean, Madam Chairman, to do questions and answers, but that I wanted.
I was just being an illustrator.
Yes, thank you very much. Much appreciated. Glenn Smith, our web host, has been busy with web training lessons in the computer lab at the school. On February 13th, he hosted the second class for the department heads, which was followed on the 14th by the first class for members of boards and committees. A second session for these folks will be arranged shortly. The engineering firm that is writing the report for the selectmen regarding the condition of the fire station roof has indicated that this will be in the town office by the end of this week. Letters to the 3 banks regarding the bids for TANs must be in the town office by March 1st and will be opened at the selectmen's meeting on March the 5th. As the selectman just said, Paddy Hines is hosting the rescheduled July 4th committee meeting this Thursday evening at 6 p.m. in the Common Man restaurant. She is encouraging members of the public to attend and get involved with this year's July the 4th celebrations. If you are planning on coming, please bring with you your thoughts and ideas on a theme for this parade. The town administrator has been contacting individuals in various sectors of our community, asking them to participate in the application process for the HEAL grant, H-E-A-L, Healthy Eating and Active Living. The response so far has been very encouraging, with the following partners representing the Community Coalition: Select Board Town Administrator Jeanette Stewart and Paul Branscombe, Planning and Zoning Susan McLeod, Public Health, Bob Hicks. Public Safety, Fire Chief Heath and Police Chief Tony Randall. School Officials, Nurse Ellen Young. Food Industry, Bob Sherfine, Terry Como. And the Common Man, Family of Restaurants, Mo Lafreniere. Community Residents, Steve and Jane Felton. Dave Toth and Fran Newton. Cheryl Thompson, Bob Baker and Jane Sawyer. The grant must be submitted by March 14th, and on April 17th the Hill grant notifications will be awarded. Thank you.
Select board items?
We have two, Madam Chairman, please. If you will. One is an abatement and the other is a current use, just for signature, not for voting.
Oh, I have one.
Make sure it's black and for the current use application. Okay. Please, thank you.
You don't need to vote on this, right? You just need to
No,
sign.
your signature is good. For Central State acquisition.
You came prepared.
Hmm?
You came prepared to hear.
This is an abatement for David and Janet Sansucci. The 2011 assessment was $1,913.47, and the revised 2011 assessment was $1,342.34. So the difference is $571.12, with an interest of $8.83 for 94 days at 6%. So the total refund is $579.95.
That has to be done.
You can, it doesn't, signature is good, but you can if you prefer a motion.
I thought that one had to be voted on, because it's a money matter.
I didn't before on the others, but you can.
It just has to be in public that you acknowledge it and things like that, but you can certainly make a motion to,
I think it better.
Well, then I'll make a motion to accept the abatement of $579.95 for David and Janet Sansucci.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries.
there's also a page behind that one you're signing right now. It's part of the
That
application.
needs to be signed?
It needs to be signed there also.
Okay.
You didn't put a tab on.
I'm sorry. I think Pat said we ran out of tabs.
The tabs run all the world, but there isn't a tab on something.
Austerity.
Stack of papers and you gotta find a tab.
Actually, I used it for this one. So,
Oh, that's where it went to.
yeah.
Use the last tab.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Paul, do you have anything else? Patsy?
So,
Public comments and concerns? Sherry?
I'm sure you all noticed that there's quilts here. This is part of the Help Us Flower Up Town for the whiskey barrels and everything. I wanted to give everybody an update. We are still selling raffle tickets for this, $1 each or $5 for 7 tickets. We hope to ask you to draw it on April 2nd at your meeting. It will be displayed now at Bob's Surefine. Hopefully Wednesday or Thursday I'll get in there. But you're going to be able to buy the tickets at Ash to Value. Where Bob's had so many employees, the Ashes said that they would sell the tickets if Terry displayed it, so they're all working together. You can still get tickets at Highlights too, if you'd like. So it's an ongoing thing. I did want to give you an update. We are now to the grand total of $581.30.
Wow, nice, good job.
Buy your tickets.
What's your goal share?
Is what?
What's your goal? Do you have a target?
Well, everybody thought, as much as possible, but I said at least $1,000 for the whiskey barrels and the flowers. Some people were concerned about the dirt costs and everything. Don LaTulip has donated all the loan we want, so we don't have to buy loan or anything. So we're looking at whiskey barrels and flowers.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments or concerns? There being no other comments or concerns, I make a motion to adjourn at 7:46 p.m. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Motion carries.